The wind in Windsor Gap did not blow so much as it scoured. It came down from the iron-gray peaks of the Sawtooth Range, sweeping across the high plains with a relentless, hollow howl that drove grit into the eyes and madness into the mind. It was the late 1880s, and the town sat huddled on the flat earth like a collection of wooden crates dropped from a passing wagon and forgotten. The main street was a river of pulverized dirt, flanked by false-fronted buildings that leaned away from the prevailing gusts as if trying to escape. The church steeple, once white, was now the color of old bone, tipping slightly to the south, a testament to the unyielding force of the Wyoming sky. Clara Vance stood behind the counter of Miller's General Mercantile, her hands trembling as she measured out a pound of coffee beans for Mrs. Gable. The air inside the store was thick with the smell of curing leather, sawdust, and the sharp tang of pickling brine. But today, those familiar scents made Clara's stomach roll like a ship in a gale. She swallowed hard, forcing a polite smile that did not reach her eyes. 2 pounds, Clara, Mrs. Gable said, her voice clipped and cold. And be quick about it. The dust is getting in everything. Clara nodded, her fingers fumbling with the scoop. She could feel the older woman's gaze boring into her, a look that had shifted in the last month from indifference to sharp-eyed suspicion. Rumors in a town the size of Windsor Gap moved faster than the wind. They whispered that Clara Vance, the quiet orphan who played the piano at the hotel on Saturday nights, had fallen from grace. They whispered that she was loose, that she had been seen walking near the river after dark, that her dresses were fitting differently. Clara set the bag of coffee on the counter. That will be 15 cents, Mrs. Gable. The woman slapped the coins down, avoiding Clara's hand. She did not say thank you. She merely snatched the bag and turned to leave, her bustle swishing indignantly. As the door opened and closed, the bell jingled, a cheerful sound that mocked the dread sitting heavy in Clara's chest. As soon as the door latched, Clara sagged against the shelving behind her. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, her palm resting protectively over the slight, hard curve hidden beneath the gathered fabric of her calico dress. She was 4 months along, and the sickness that plagued her mornings was becoming harder to hide. She was 22 years old, unmarried, and destitute. In the eyes of Windsor Gap, she was already ruined. She closed her eyes, fighting the nausea. The image of Harlan Graves rose in her mind, dark and suffocating. Harlan was the owner of the Double Bar G, the largest cattle operation in the county. He was a man of 50, silver-haired, handsome in a predatory way, and wealthy enough to buy the law if he chose. He was also married to a frail woman who rarely left her bed, a fact that had not stopped him from pursuing Clara with promises of kindness that had quickly turned to demands. She had been foolish, she had been lonely, and now she was paying a price that Harlan refused to acknowledge. The bell above the door chimed again, heavier this time. Clara straightened, smoothing her apron, expecting another town wife coming to scorn her. Instead, a blast of cold air swept in, followed by a man who seemed to block out the light from the street. He was tall, standing well over 6 feet, with shoulders broad enough to carry a heifer. His long duster coat was stained with the reddish mud of the Badlands, and his hat was pulled low, shadowing a face that looked as though it had been carved from granite and left out in the rain. Silas Cord. The store went quiet. 2 men playing checkers by the stove stopped mid-move. Silas Cord was a ghost story in the flesh. He lived 20 miles out on a patch of scrubland near the foothills that no one else wanted. 5 years ago, during the Great Blizzard of 1886, he had lost his young wife and newborn child. The story went that he had been trapped in the drifts, unable to get back to the house in time to keep the fire going. When the snows melted, they found him half dead, holding their frozen bodies. Since then, he rarely spoke, rarely came to town, and never smiled. He walked to the counter, his boots heavy on the floorboards. He placed a coil of rope and a box of cartridges on the wood. "I need nails," he said. His voice was like grinding stones, low and rough. Clara moved to fetch the jar of nails, conscious of his eyes on her. They were dark eyes, set deep under heavy brows. But they were not cruel. They were merely empty, or perhaps full of something so old and heavy it looked like emptiness. As she weighed the nails, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The room tilted. She gripped the edge of the scale to keep from falling, her breath catching in her throat. Silas watched her. He saw the pallor of her skin, the sheen of sweat on her upper lip, and the way her hand instinctively went to her waist. His gaze lingered there for a second, sharp and knowing, before snapping back to her face. "You all right, miss?" he asked. It was not a polite inquiry. It was a demand for facts. "I am fine," Clara whispered, though her voice shook. "Just the heat." "It is freezing outside," Silas said. He did not press her. He paid for his goods, counting out the coins with hands that were crisscrossed with white scars, barbed wire cuts, burns, the map of a hard life. As he gathered his things, he looked at her one last time. It was a look of recognition, though she could not say what he recognized. Perhaps it was simply the look of an animal that knows when another animal is wounded. "Take care of yourself," he muttered, touching the brim of his hat. He turned and left, taking the silence with him. Later that afternoon, the sky began to bruise. Purple and black clouds stacked up over the mountains, blotting out the sun. The wind picked up, carrying the taste of static and sulfur. Clara left the store early, claiming a headache. She needed to see Harlan. He had sent a boy with a note demanding she meet him behind the livery stable at 5 o'clock. She walked through the alleyways, keeping her head down. The wind whipped her skirts around her legs. When she reached the back of the livery, the smell of horse manure and damp hay was overpowering. Harlan was waiting in the shadows, smoking a cigar. "You are late," he said, tossing the cigar into the dirt and grinding it out with his polished boot. "I could not get away sooner," Clara said. She stood 10 feet from him, refusing to come closer. Harlan sighed, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a leather pouch and held it up. It clinked heavily. "There is $50 in here, Clara. That is enough to get you to Denver, maybe even San Francisco. You leave tomorrow on the morning stage." Clara stared at the pouch. "I cannot go to Denver, Harlan. I have no kin there. I have nowhere to go." "That is not my concern," he said, his voice dropping to a chillingly reasonable tone. "You are becoming a problem. People are talking. My wife has heard things. I will not have my name dragged through the mud by a shop girl with loose morals." "Your name?" Clara stepped forward, anger flaring hot in her chest. "This is your child, Harlan. You have a responsibility." "I have a reputation," he snapped, his face flushing red, "and I have the means to protect it. You take this money and you disappear. If you stay, you will find this town remarkably inhospitable." "I will not go," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I will not run away and raise this child in a gutter because you are too proud to own your mistakes." Harlan stared at her for a long moment. The faux kindness vanished, replaced by a cold, reptilian stillness. "You are making a mistake, Clara. A dangerous one." He shoved the money back into his pocket. "Suit yourself, but do not say I did not offer you a way out." He tipped his hat, a mockery of a gentleman's gesture, and walked away, disappearing into the gathering gloom. Clara stood shaking in the wind, tears stinging her eyes. She felt small and fragile against the darkening sky. She turned to head home, taking the shortcut through the narrow alley that ran behind the saloon. The wind was howling now, kicking up blinding clouds of dust that stung her cheeks. She did not hear the man behind her until it was too late. A hand, rough and smelling of stale whiskey, clamped over her mouth. Another arm wrapped around her waist, hauling her backward. Clara tried to scream, but the sound was smothered against a calloused palm. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her. "Quiet now, little bird," a voice hissed in her ear. It was not Harlan. It was a stranger's voice, slurred and wet. The man dragged her toward the deeper shadows, where the refuse barrels were stacked. "Just want to teach you a lesson. Teach you when to leave well enough alone." He shoved her hard. Clara stumbled, her shoulders slamming into the rough wood of the saloon wall. She spun around, gasping, her hands flying to her belly. The man was large, dressed in ragged clothes, his face hidden by a low hat and a scarf. He lunged for her again, his fist raised. Clara ducked, screaming as loud as she could, but the wind tore the sound away. She kicked out, her boot connecting with his shin, but he only grunted and grabbed her by the hair, yanking her head back. "Please!" she shrieked. "No!" He raised his hand to strike her, and Clara squeezed her eyes shut, curling her body inward to shield the baby. Then the world exploded. A dark shape slammed into her attacker with the force of a runaway train. There was a sickening crunch of bone meeting bone, and the man holding her was ripped away, sent sprawling into the dirt. Clara slumped against the wall, gasping for air. Through the swirling dust, she saw Silas Cord. He did not look like a man. He looked like a thunderstorm. He had the attacker by the collar, hauling him up only to drive a fist into his jaw with terrifying precision. The attacker crumbled, blood spraying from his mouth. Silas did not stop. He kicked the man in the ribs, a savage, calculated blow meant to break things. The attacker scrambled backward, wheezing, terrified, and scrambled to his feet, running blindly out of the alley and into the street. Silas turned, his chest heaving. His eyes were wild, the adrenaline still coursing through him. He stepped toward Clara, his hand reaching out to grab her arm, perhaps to steady her, perhaps to move her. His grip was tight and urgent. "We have to move," he growled, the violence still humming in his voice. He yanked her forward, away from the wall. Clara stumbled, her legs giving out. The sudden motion sent a sharp pain through her abdomen. She grabbed his forearm, digging her fingers into his coat. "Easy," she gasped, the word tearing from her throat. "Easy. I am pregnant." The words hit Silas like a physical blow. He froze. His hand, which had been gripping her arm with bruising force, went instantly slack. He looked down at her, at the way she was curled around her midsection, terrified and pale in the dying light. The fury in his eyes shattered, replaced by a look of hollow shock. For a heartbeat, the wind seemed to stop. He looked at her belly, then at her face. and she saw the ghost of his dead wife pass behind his eyes, the memory of a life lost, of a woman he had failed to protect. Before he could speak, voices erupted at the mouth of the alley. The commotion had drawn a crowd. The attacker had run right into the path of the sheriff and a group of men coming out of the saloon. "What in blazes is going on here?" Sheriff Miller shouted, lantern lights swinging wildly. People pushed into the alley. They saw the blood on the ground. They saw Silas Cord standing over Clara Vance, his breathing hard, her clinging to him for support. "It is that rancher," a woman's voice shrilled. "He is hurting her." "No," someone else argued. "Look at him. He was fighting." Then the whispers started, serpentine and quick. "Look at how he stands with her. Look at her dress. I told you she was in trouble. You think it is him? You think the hermit got her that way?" The crowd swelled, pressing in like a ring of vultures. Clara felt the shame burn her cheeks hotter than the wind. She tried to pull away from Silas, but her legs would not hold her. Harlan Graves pushed his way to the front of the circle. He looked from the fleeing attacker, whom he likely knew well, to Clara and Silas. A flicker of calculation passed over his face. He saw his escape. "Well, now," Harlan boomed, his voice projecting over the wind. "I suppose the truth comes out. We all wondered who the father was. I never took you for the type to take advantage of a girl in trouble, Cord, but I suppose living out there alone makes a beast of a man." "It is not him," Clara cried out, but her voice was weak, swallowed by the murmurs of the crowd. "The rancher, Silas Cord. He is the father." The rumors flew, transforming into fact before they even hit the ground. The sheriff stepped forward, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Is this true, Silas? Is this your doing?" Silas looked at the crowd. He saw the judgment, the hunger for scandal. He looked at Harlan Graves, standing there in his fine suit, righteous and clean, while Clara stood trembling in the filth of the alley. He heard the women whispering about the home for wayward women in Cheyenne, a place where babies went to die and women were erased. He looked down at Clara. She was looking up at him, eyes wide with terror, pleading silently for him not to let them destroy her. Silas felt a familiar dark ache in his chest. He remembered the sound of the wind the night his wife died. He remembered the doctor who would not come because the weather was too bad, because Silas was just a poor rancher. He remembered the helplessness. He looked at Harlan Graves, and a cold, hard resolve settled in his gut. He would not let another innocent thing die because of a rich man's convenience. "Yeah," Silas said. His voice was loud, cutting through the chatter like a whip crack. The crowd went silent. "She is with me," Silas declared, stepping between Clara and the town. "The child is mine." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Harlan's eyes narrowed, a flash of genuine anger breaking his mask. This was not the plan. Silas Cord was a wild card, a dangerous variable. "You have a strange way of showing affection, Cord," Harlan sneered, "letting her work in town while you hide in the hills. It is disgraceful." "We are getting married," Silas said, the lie tasting like ash and iron in his mouth. "Tonight." Clara's head snapped up. She stared at him, shocked, temporarily overriding her fear. "Silas, no," she whispered, but he clamped a hand over hers, silencing her. "Married." The sheriff looked skeptical. "Tonight, right now," Silas said. He glared at the preacher, who was hovering nervously at the back of the group. "Reverend, open the doors." It was a command, not a request. Silas wrapped his arm around Clara's shoulders, stiffly awkwardly and began to propel her forward. The crowd parted, too stunned to block a man who looked ready to kill anyone who stood in his way. Silas walked fast, forcing Clara to half-run to keep up. She was dizzy, her mind reeling. He is claiming it. He is saving me. He is ruining himself. Harlan watched them go, his jaw working. He had wanted her gone, not protected by a man who had nothing to lose. Silas marched her up the wooden steps of the church. The wind slammed the doors open. Inside it was cold and smelled of beeswax and old hymnals. He dragged her to the altar, where the bewildered Reverend Miller stood, clutching his Bible. "Marry us," Silas rasped. "Silas, this is highly irregular," the Reverend stammered. "There are banns to be read, counseling to be—" "Do it," Silas snarled, slamming his hand on the altar rail. "Before I change my mind, or before I go back out there and finish what I started in that alley." The Reverend swallowed hard. He looked at Clara. "Miss Vance, do you consent to this?" Clara looked at Silas. His face was rigid, his eyes fixed on the cross behind the pulpit. He was shaking, a fine tremor running through his large frame. She realized he was just as terrified as she was. He was trapping himself to save her. If she said no, she walked back out into that alley, alone, with Harlan Graves waiting. "Yes," she whispered, her voice hollow. "I consent." The ceremony was a blur of words she barely heard. Two men from the saloon stood by the door, hats in hands, serving as reluctant witnesses. The lantern light flickered, casting long, dancing shadows against the peeling paint of the walls. When it came time for the ring, Silas fumbled in his vest pocket. He pulled out a plain silver band, worn thin with age. It had been his mother's, or perhaps his first wife's. He took Clara's cold, rough hand in his. His fingers were calloused and warm. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was too loose. "With this ring, I thee wed," he mumbled, looking at her chin rather than her eyes. "I pronounce you man and wife," the Reverend said, sounding exhausted. Silas did not kiss her. He did not even look at her. He turned and signed the ledger with a scratching pen, then handed the pen to her. Clara signed her name, Clara Cord. The ink looked black and permanent. "Let's go," Silas said. He led her back down the aisle and pushed open the heavy oak doors. They stepped out into the biting cold of the night. The storm clouds had broken, leaving a sky that was violently clear. A million stars stared down at them, cold and indifferent diamonds scattered across the velvet black. The wind had died down to a whisper, leaving the town silent. Clara stood on the geeky church steps, shivering. She looked at the wagon Silas had hitched nearby. She looked at the man standing beside her, a stranger with scars on his hands and ghosts in his eyes. She was safe from Harlan Graves. She was safe from the alley. But as she looked up at the vast, uncaring western sky, a surge of pure terror washed over her. She was married to a man she barely knew, a man who had claimed her out of anger and grief. She belonged to him now. Silas climbed onto the wagon seat and looked down at her, his face unreadable in the starlight. "Get in," he said. "We have a long ride." Clara placed her hand on her belly, took a breath that tasted of frost and dust, and climbed up. She had survived the day, but as the wagon jolted into motion, leaving the lights of Windsor Gap behind, she feared she might live to regret it. The sun rose over Windsor Gap like a bruised peach, casting a weak, watery light across the frosted rooftops. It was the sort of dawn that offered no warmth, only the stark revelation of the dust and grime the night had hidden. The wind had died down to a sullen breeze, but the air remained sharp enough to cut glass. Clara Vance, now Clara Cord, though the name felt like a borrowed coat that did not fit, stood on the wooden boardwalk outside the Mercantile. Beside her sat a small, pathetic bundle wrapped in brown twine. It contained everything she owned in the world: 2 dresses, a Bible that had belonged to her mother, a hairbrush with missing bristles, and a pair of worn button boots. She stared at the town. It was an ugly collection of lumber and mud, yet it was the only home she had known since her parents died of the fever 3 years ago. It was the place where she had learned to sew, where she had played the piano in the hotel parlor for 50 cents a night, and where she had foolishly believed that a man like Harlan Graves could love a woman who had nothing to give but herself. The town was waking up. A few early risers moved through the streets, their breath puffing out in white clouds. 2 women from the church auxiliary walked past, clutching their shawls tight against their throats. They slowed as they saw Clara, their eyes darting to the bundle at her feet, and then to the wagon waiting at the curb. "Good morning, Mrs. Gable," said one, her voice brittle. "Good morning," Clara replied, lifting her chin. She would not let them see her tremble. "We heard the news," the other woman said, her lips pursing as if she had tasted something sour. "Married in the dead of night. Well, I suppose it is for the best. At least the child will have a name." "At least now she has a husband," Mrs. Gable murmured, loud enough for Clara to hear, but directed at her companion. "Even if it is him." They hurried on, heads bent together, likely rushing to the bakery to spread the fresh details of Clara's disgrace. Clara watched them go, feeling a hot flush of shame prickle her neck. They did not see a survivor. They saw a scandal, swept under a rug. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention to the street. Silas Cord was leading a team of 2 massive bays toward the wagon. He moved with a slow, deliberate economy, checking the harness, tightening a strap, patting the neck of the near horse. He did not look at the townspeople watching him from the safety of their windows. He seemed to exist in his own gravity, separate from the petty judgments of Windsor Gap. He tied the horses and walked up the boardwalk steps. He was wearing the same duster he had worn the night before, the leather stained and stiff. Up close, in the unforgiving morning light, he looked older than she had realized. There were deep lines bracketing his mouth, and gray streaked his temples. "Ready?" he asked. It was not a question of comfort. It was a question of logistics. "Yes," Clara said. He reached for her bundle, tossing it easily into the back of the wagon among sacks of flour, coils of wire, and crates of tinned goods. Then he turned to her. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before reaching out to take her elbow. His grip was firm but careful, as if he were handling something that might shatter. "Watch your step," he muttered. Clara placed her foot on the wheel hub to hoist herself up. A black carriage rolled down the main street, drawn by a high-stepping white stallion. It was Harlan Graves. He sat tall in the seat, dressed in a charcoal wool suit, looking every inch the cattle baron. He slowed the carriage as he passed the wagon. His eyes met Clara's. There was no remorse in them, no sorrow. Instead, he tipped his hat, a slow smile spreading across his face, a smile that said, "Good riddance." It was a look of supreme victory. He had successfully discarded his problem without costing himself a dime or a smudge on his reputation. Clara froze, her hand gripping the iron rail of the wagon seat until her knuckles turned white. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold ran down her spine. Silas saw him too. He stood by the wagon wheel, his body tensing like a coiled spring. He did not acknowledge Harlan's greeting. He simply stared at the man with a flat, dead gaze that lasted until the carriage rolled past and disappeared around the corner toward the livery. "Get in," Silas said, his voice rougher than before. Clara climbed up, settling herself on the hard wooden bench. Silas walked around the front, swung himself up beside her, and gathered the reins. He did not look at her. "Yeah," he called out. The wagon jerked forward. The iron-rimmed wheels crunched over the frozen ruts of the street. They rolled past the saloon, past the church with its leaning steeple, and past the mercantile where she had worked only yesterday. Clara did not look back. She kept her eyes fixed on the ears of the horses, watching them twitch until the buildings gave way to scrub brush and the open, terrifying expanse of the prairie. There was no turning back now. The silence in the wagon was heavier than the sacks of grain behind them. For the first hour, the only sounds were the rhythmic thud of hooves, the creak of the leather springs, and the relentless whistling of the wind through the tall grass. The landscape of the Wyoming Territory stretched out in every direction, a vast ocean of brown and gold. It was beautiful in a cruel way, endless and indifferent. The sky was a hard, pale blue, stripped clean of clouds, and the sun beat down with a deceptive brightness that offered no heat. Clara sat with her hands folded over her belly, the motion of the wagon vibrating through her bones. The shock of the previous night was beginning to wear off, replaced by a simmering resentment. She looked at Silas's profile. He stared straight ahead, his jaw set, his eyes scanning the horizon as if looking for threats. "Why did you do it?" she asked suddenly. Her voice sounded small in the vastness of the plains. Silas did not turn his head. He flicked the reins slightly. "Do what?" he asked. "Marry me," she said. "You do not know me. You do not want a wife. You certainly do not want another man's child." Silas was silent for a long time. He chewed on the inside of his cheek. "You were in a bad spot," he said finally. "I could have handled it," Clara lied. She knew she couldn't have handled it, but her pride demanded she say it. "No," Silas said. He turned to look at her then, his dark eyes piercing. "You could not have. Harlan Graves would have ground you into dust, Clara, or that man in the alley would have finished the job." Clara flinched. The memory of the alley was still a raw wound. "But marriage," she pressed. "You have tied yourself to a scandal. They are laughing at you, Silas. They are saying you are a fool." "Let them talk," he said, turning back to the road. "Words do not kill. Winter does. Starvation does. Men like Graves do. Gossip is just wind." "But I had no say in it," Clara burst out, her frustration boiling over. "You dragged me to that altar. You made the decision for me. I am the one carrying this child, yet I was treated like a piece of livestock being traded to the highest bidder. I should have had a choice." Silas's hands tightened on the leather reins until the leather creaked. His jaw bunched. "You needed out," he said, his voice dropping to a growl. "And so did that baby. Sometimes you do not get a choice about survival. You just grab the hand that pulls you out of the fire." He snapped the reins, urging the horses to a faster trot, effectively ending the conversation. Clara sank back against the seat, arms crossed over her chest. She hated him for being right. She hated him for his arrogance. And mostly she hated that she was dependent on this stranger who spoke in commands and absolutes. By midday, the terrain began to change. The flat plains gave way to rolling hills, dotted with sagebrush and jagged outcrops of sandstone. The trail grew rougher, forcing the wagon to pitch and sway violently. Clara's morning sickness, which had abated during the adrenaline of the departure, returned with a vengeance. Every jolt of the wheel sent a wave of nausea rolling through her. She pressed a handkerchief to her mouth, her skin turning the color of old parchment. Silas noticed. He slowed the horses, though he did not stop. "Breathe through your nose," he instructed. "Look at the horizon, not the ground." They came to the crossing of the Powder River. It was low this time of year, but the water was fast and gray, churning over slick river stones. The banks were steep and muddy. "Hold on," Silas warned. He guided the horses down the embankment. The wagon lurched forward, sliding in the mud. Clara gasped, grabbing the seat rail. The horses splashed into the icy water, their hooves slipping on the hidden rocks. The current pushed against the wheels, fighting the wagon's progress. Suddenly, the front left wheel jammed against a submerged boulder. The wagon halted with a bone-jarring thud, tilting dangerously to the left. Water rushed over the floorboards on Clara's side. "Stay put!" Silas shouted. He threw the reins to the floor and vaulted off the wagon, splashing into the knee-deep, freezing water. The horses were whinnying, rolling their eyes in panic. Silas grabbed the bridle of the near horse, speaking in a low, calming rumble. He put his shoulder against the wet wood of the wagon, his boot slipping on the riverbed, and shoved with immense strength. "Heave!" he grunted. With a screech of wood against stone, the wheel broke free. Silas patted the horse's flank and scrambled back up onto the seat, dripping wet. He snapped the reins, and the team hauled the wagon up the opposite bank, mud flying from their hooves. When they reached solid ground, Silas pulled the team to a halt. He was breathing hard, water dripping from his coat. He looked at Clara. She was clutching her belly, her eyes squeezed shut, fighting the urge to be sick. "You all right?" he asked. Clara nodded weakly, unable to speak. Silas reached into the back and pulled out a canteen. He uncorked it and handed it to her. "Water, drink." She took a sip. It was metallic and lukewarm, but it helped settle her stomach. She looked at Silas's soaked boots and trousers. "You are freezing," she said. "I am fine," he muttered. "We have 10 miles to go." The weather turned 2 hours later. It started with a strange stillness. The wind dropped and the birds stopped singing. To the west, the sky turned a sickly shade of green, then deepened into a bruised purple. A wall of clouds, taller than mountains, marched across the plains, devouring the sunlight. "Storm," Silas said, scanning the sky. "A bad one." He pulled the wagon into the lee of a low limestone ridge, hoping to find some shelter from the coming wind. He jumped down and quickly hobbled the horses, tying them securely to the wagon wheels. Then he grabbed a heavy canvas tarp from the back. "Get under," he ordered, climbing back into the seat. He pulled the canvas up over their heads, just as the heavens opened. It was not rain. It was a deluge. Ice-cold water hammered against the canvas with a deafening roar. The wind returned with a scream, tearing at the edges of their shelter. Lightning webbed across the sky, followed instantly by cracks of thunder that shook the wagon frame. Clara shrieked as a particularly loud boom rattled her teeth. She shrank away from the open side of the wagon. "Come here," Silas said. It was not a suggestion. He pulled her toward the center of the seat, away from the wind and rain. There was no room for modesty. They huddled together under the dark, heavy tent of the canvas. Clara's shoulder was pressed against his arm. She could feel the heat of his body through his damp coat. He smelled of wet wool, tobacco, horse sweat, and rain. They sat in the semi-darkness, the storm raging around them like a living thing trying to tear them apart. The intimacy of the space was overwhelming. Clara could hear his breathing, slow and steady, contrasting with the frantic rhythm of her own heart. "My parents died in a storm like this," Clara whispered. She did not mean to say it. The words just slipped out, pulled loose by the thunder. Silas turned his head in the dim light. His eyes were softened by the shadows. "The fever?" he asked. "No, that was later," Clara said, staring at her hands. They were caught out on the road coming back from Cheyenne. The wagon overturned in the wind. My father broke his leg. My mother tried to walk for help. They both caught pneumonia. They died 3 days apart a month later. She shivered. I was 19. I sold the farm to pay the doctor. I moved to town, thinking it would be safer. She gave a bitter laugh. Safer? And then the town turned on me the moment I showed, the moment I needed help. I was just a sinner. Silas was quiet for a long time. The rain drummed on the canvas, a relentless rhythm. "This country does not care about safe," he said softly. "It only cares about strong. And even then, sometimes it doesn't matter." He shifted, his arm brushing against hers. "My wife, Sarah," he began, his voice rough, like gravel grinding together. "She was strong, stronger than me. We had been out at the ranch for 2 years. It was a hard life, but we were making it work." He paused, listening to the thunder. It was January 1886. The Chinook had melted the snow, so we thought spring was coming early. Then the blizzard hit. It came out of nowhere. Whiteout conditions in an hour. She went into labor early. Clara held her breath, turning to look at his profile. He was staring at the canvas weave, as if reading a tragedy written there. "I tried to ride for the doctor in town," Silas continued. "The snow was belly deep on the horse. The wind was 60 miles an hour. I made it to the edge of town. The doctor, he looked out the window and told me he would not risk his neck for a rancher's wife. Said to go back and do my best." His voice cracked, a jagged sound of pure pain. "By the time I got back, it was too late. The fire had gone out. She had bled too much. The baby never took a breath. I held them both until they turned cold." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She reached out, her hand hovering for a moment before she placed it gently on his forearm. His muscles were rock hard, tense with the memory. "I am so sorry, Silas," she whispered. He did not pull away, but he did not lean into her touch either. He simply existed in the space of his grief. "That is why I did it, Clara," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. "In the alley, I saw them circling you. I saw the way they looked at you, like you were nothing, like that baby was nothing. I could not watch it happen again." The storm passed as quickly as it had arrived, leaving the air scoured clean and sharp. Silas threw back the canvas. The world was dripping wet, the sagebrush smelling pungent and wild. They continued in silence, but the quality of the silence had changed. It was no longer heavy with resentment. It was heavy with shared wounds. They passed the skeleton of a homestead, a collapsed roof, and a chimney standing like a tombstone in the grass. Further on, the bleached rib cage of a buffalo lay by the trail, white bone against the dark earth. A buzzard circled high above, a black speck in the clearing sky. Life is easily lost here, Clara thought, and easily taken. Dusk was bleeding across the sky when they finally reached the ranch. It was nestled against a line of low, jagged hills that looked like the teeth of a saw. The main house was small, built of rough-hewn logs and sod, with a low porch facing east. A barn, slightly larger than the house, stood 100 yards away, along with a corral where a few cattle stood, their coats steaming in the cooling air. A windmill creaked rhythmically, a lonely sound that seemed to emphasize the isolation. There were no other lights, no other smoke from chimneys. Just the ranch and the endless, empty plain. "Home?" Silas said grimly. He pulled the wagon up to the house. He helped her down, his hands lingering for a moment on her waist to steady her. She was exhausted, her body aching from the ride. Silas carried her bundle inside. The door creaked on leather hinges. The interior was one large room with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and a smaller door leading to a bedroom. It was clean, but it felt abandoned, as if time had stopped 5 years ago. Clara's eyes were drawn instantly to the corner. There, gathering dust, sat a wooden cradle, hand-carved with intricate vines. Beside it, hanging on a wooden peg, was a woman's knitted shawl, moth-eaten and gray. Against the far wall stood an upright piano, its finish dull, one key sticking up at an odd angle. The ghost of Sarah was everywhere. It hung in the air like smoke. Silas saw her looking. He set her bundle down on the table, his movements jerky. I haven't moved things much," he said, sounding defensive. "It is a fine house," Clara lied gently. He walked to the bedroom door and pushed it open. There was a sturdy iron bed frame with a quilt made of patchwork calico. "You take the bed," he said. "I will sleep in the lean-to off the kitchen. There is a cot out there." "Silas, you don't have to—" "I work early," he cut her off. "I will not disturb you." He retreated to the kitchen area, putting distance between them. His protectiveness was there. He lit the fire. He pumped water for her, but it was wrapped in layers of awkward stiffness. He was a man who had forgotten how to share his space with the living. That night, Clara lay in the iron bed, staring up at the rough beams of the ceiling. The wind had picked up again, whistling through the chinking of the logs. Outside, a coyote howled, a long, wavering cry that was answered by another, and then another. She felt alone, more alone than she had felt in the town. Then she felt it, a flutter low in her belly, like the wings of a trapped moth. She gasped softly, placing her hands on her skin. It happened again, stronger this time, a distinct kick. It was the first time the baby had moved since the attack in the alley. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes, tracking into her hair. She thought of the alley. She thought of Harlan's cold smile. She thought of Silas's scarred hands holding the reins, guiding them through the river. He had taken her choice away, yes. He was a stranger with a haunted house and a broken heart. But as the wind rattled the window pane, Clara realized that if he hadn't acted, she might be dead, or the baby might be dead. Regret churned in her chest, regret for the life she had wanted, for the romance she had dreamed of as a girl. But underneath the regret was a small, hard kernel of gratitude. She fell asleep to the sound of the windmill creaking in the dark. The next morning, the smell of frying bacon woke her. She dressed awkwardly, her dress tight across her stomach, and went out into the main room. Silas was already up. He had made coffee and biscuits. He stood by the fireplace, drinking from a tin cup. "Eat," he said, pointing to the plate on the table. Clara sat. "Good morning." Silas did not return the greeting. He set his cup down. "Here's how it is going to be," he said, his tone flat and authoritative. "You do not ride. Not on a horse, not in the wagon unless we have to go to town. The jarring is bad for the baby." Clara paused, a biscuit halfway to her mouth. "You do not lift anything heavier than a milk pail," he continued, counting off on his fingers. "You do not go near the corral when the stock is in, and you do not walk out past the fence line alone. There are wolves and rattlers." He looked at her, his eyes dark with an intensity that bordered on panic. "I will speak to Mrs. Miller at the next homestead over. She is a widow, needs money. I will pay her to come by twice a week to help with the heavy washing and the scrubbing. You take it easy. Do you understand?" Clara bristled. The tone was that of a father scolding a child, or a jailer instructing a prisoner. "I am pregnant, Silas, not an invalid," she said, her voice sharp. "I have worked my whole life. I can sweep a floor." "You will do as I say," Silas snapped, his voice rising. He leaned forward, gripping the back of the chair opposite her. "I will not lose another one, Clara. Not on my watch." He stared at her belly, terror naked in his face. It wasn't tyranny, she realized. It was trauma. He was terrified that if she lifted a finger, history would repeat itself, and she would shatter into dust like his first family. Clara softened. She set the biscuit down. "I will be careful, Silas," she said quietly. "But I need to be useful. I cannot just sit in this house with the ghosts." Silas flinched. He looked toward the corner where the cradle sat. He picked up his hat and jammed it onto his head. "Just stay inside today," he muttered. He turned and walked out the door, closing it firmly behind him. Clara watched him through the window as he marched toward the barn, his shoulders hunched against the wind, a man fighting a war against a past that refused to stay buried. The weeks that followed bled into a rhythm as unyielding as the Wyoming wind. Life on the Cord Ranch was a series of battles fought against the earth itself. The sun rose like a hammer, beating down on the high plains until the air shimmered with heat, and the wind never ceased its scouring work. It drove grit into every crack of the log house, coated the plates in the cupboard, and settled in the folds of Clara's clothes. She tasted dust in her morning coffee and felt it between her sheets at night. Clara settled into a routine born of necessity. Her belly was growing heavy, the child claiming more space with each passing day. But there was no room for idleness. She took over the cooking, learning to make bread that did not taste like alkali, and she scrubbed the floors until her knees were bruised. She planted a small garden near the back porch, turnips, potatoes, a few rows of hardy beans, and fought a daily war to keep the rabbits and the drought from claiming them. Silas was a ghost in his own house. He rose before the light touched the peaks of the Sawtooth Range, drinking his coffee standing up by the cold hearth, and was gone before Clara fully woke. She would see him from the window, a dark silhouette against the pale grass, riding the fence line or driving the small herd of cattle toward the shrinking creek. He worked with a desperate, punishing intensity, as if he could sweat out the memories that haunted this place. The land showed no mercy. One afternoon, a sudden dust devil tore through the yard, ripping the sheets Clara had hung on the line and scattering them into the sagebrush. She spent an hour chasing them down, the wind whipping her hair across her face until her skin felt raw. When she finally retrieved the last shirt, she sat on the porch steps, gasping for air, clutching her side. She realized then that there was no softness here. You stood up or you blew away. 2 weeks into their marriage, Silas announced they needed to visit the Miller homestead, 5 miles to the east. He needed to trade a heifer for seed, and he wanted Clara to meet Mrs. Miller. "It will be good for you to see another woman," he said, not looking at her as he hitched the team. Clara felt a flutter of hope. She wore her best dress, though the buttons at the waist had to be moved, and tied a ribbon in her hair. The Miller place was smaller than the Cord Ranch, a sod house dug halfway into a hillside. Mrs. Miller was a thin woman, with hands like bird claws and eyes that darted nervously. She welcomed them with coffee that was too weak and biscuits that were too hard, but she seemed kind enough at first. Silas went out to the barn with Mr. Miller, leaving the women alone in the dim kitchen. Mrs. Miller watched Clara over the rim of her cup. Her gaze lingered on the gold band on Clara's finger, then dropped to the swell of her stomach. "You are far along," Mrs. Miller noted. "5 months," Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. Mrs. Miller set her cup down. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and thick. "You know," she began, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper, "folks in town are talking. My husband heard it at the feed store." Clara stiffened. "What are they saying?" "They say you snared him," Mrs. Miller said, leaning forward. "They say Silas Cord was a broken man, half crazy with grief, and you saw a way to get a roof over your head. They say you trapped him into this marriage to hide your shame, and now his name is ruined right along with yours." The words were like slaps. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "That is not true," Clara whispered. "He chose to help me." Mrs. Miller sat back, looking skeptical. "A man like Silas does not choose scandal, Mrs. Cord. He just does not know how to say no to a woman in trouble. But you mark my words. A marriage built on a lie does not hold up against the winter." The ride back to the ranch was excruciating. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and violet. But Clara felt only cold. She sat stiffly on the wagon seat, staring straight ahead. Silas glanced at her. "Mrs. Miller treats you all right?" Clara let out a short, bitter laugh. "She told me everyone thinks I trapped you, that I snared a grieving widower to cover my sin." Silas's hands tightened on the reins. The leather creaked. "She said I ruined your name," Clara added, her voice trembling. Silas stared at the horizon. The muscles in his jaw worked as he ground his teeth. "My name," he scoffed, though there was no humor in it. "My name has not been worth a plug nickel in this county for 5 years, not since Sarah died. They called me a hermit, a lunatic. Now they call me a fool. It is just a different word for the same thing." "But do you regret it?" Clara asked, turning to him. The question had been burning a hole in her chest for days. "Do you regret standing up in that alley?" Silas looked at her then. His eyes were dark, shadowed by the brim of his hat. She saw the anger there, but also a deep, weary shame, not of her, but of the situation, of the fact that he had to fight the whole world just to do a decent thing. "A name does not keep you warm, Clara," he said roughly, "and a reputation does not feed a child. I did what I had to do. You are safe. That is what matters." He turned back to the horses, his profile etched in stone. He said it was about safety, but Claire could see the weight of it sitting on his shoulders. He was a proud man. and the town was stripping him of his dignity, piece by piece, because of her. The prejudice leaked into their lives like water through a cracked roof. A week later, a letter arrived from the preacher. It was addressed to Silas, but he tossed it on the table after reading it, his face thunderous. Clara read it later. It was a sermon on the sanctity of marriage and the evils of sinful haste, urging them to repent for their deception. A traveling trader stopped by the ranch a few days after that. He sold tinware and spices. When Clara came out to the wagon to look at the goods, the man refused to meet her eyes. He spoke only to Silas, referring to Clara as the woman, and making a crude joke about damaged goods when he thought she was out of earshot. Silas had ordered him off the land with a hand resting on his pistol. Inside the house, the tension grew. They were two strangers trapped in a small box, bound by a lie and a baby. At night, they ate supper by the light of a kerosene lamp. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes. They passed the bread and the salt with polite murmurs, careful not to touch. Silas slept in the lean-to, a drafty addition off the kitchen, while Clara took the bed. Yet the distance was charged. Clara would look up from her mending to find him watching her, his gaze brooding and intense. When their eyes met, he would look away quickly, focusing on oiling his bridle or whittling a piece of wood. There was an undercurrent of unspoken desire, a heat that had nothing to do with the fire in the hearth. One evening, the air in the cabin was particularly cold. Clara was draining a pot of boiled potatoes at the sink. Her back was aching, a dull throb that had been constant for days. As she lifted the heavy iron pot, her grip slipped on the hot handle. The pot tipped. Scalding water splashed onto the floorboards. Clara gasped, jumping back to avoid the burn, but her foot caught on the edge of the rug. She stumbled, flailing, her center of gravity shifted by the baby. Careful! Silas was there in a heartbeat. He crossed the room in 2 long strides and caught her. His arm hooked around her waist, pulling her hard against him to keep her from falling. His other hand splayed across her back, pressing her into his chest. Clara grabbed his shirt to steady herself. For a moment, time stopped. She was pressed along the length of his body, feeling the hardness of his chest and the strength of his thighs. She looked up, breathless. Silas was looking down at her. His face was inches from hers. She could smell the tobacco and the soap he used, the scent of rain on his skin. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown, stripping away the guarded mask he usually wore. His hand on her back shifted slightly, his fingers digging into the fabric of her dress. He did not look at her belly. He looked at her mouth. The air in the kitchen grew thick and heavy. Clara felt a flush climb her neck, heating her cheeks. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm that she knew he could feel. She saw his gaze drop to her lips, saw his breath hitch. Her body, despite the shame, despite the anger, leaned into him. She wanted him to kiss her. The realization was a shock of lightning. Then Silas blinked. The mask slammed back into place. He released her abruptly, stepping back as if she were red-hot iron. He put the width of the table between them, his breathing ragged. You need to be more careful," he stammered, his voice rough. "I slipped," Clara whispered, her hands shaking as she smoothed her apron. "You need rest," Silas muttered. "Leave the mess. I will clean it. Go to bed." He turned his back on her, grabbing his coat from the hook by the door. He shoved his arms into it and went outside into the dark, leaving Clara standing in the puddle of water, trembling, confused by the sudden fierce ache of emptiness where his arms had been. As the pregnancy advanced into the 6th month, Clara's body became a burden. Her back ached constantly, and her ankles swelled after a day on her feet. She found it harder to bend down to the garden or lift the laundry tub. Silas noticed. He did not say anything, but he began to change. He started rising an hour earlier to haul the water for the day, so she would not have to work the pump. He took over the milking of the single cow they kept for the house. One afternoon, Clara came inside to find him kneeling by the piano. He had his tool roll out. He was carefully gluing the ivory veneer back onto the broken key that had stuck up like a snaggletooth since she arrived. I thought you might want to play it sometime," he said gruffly, not looking up. "When the baby comes, music is good for a baby." He fixed the loose floorboard that always tripped her. He mended the leak in the roof over the bed. He was preparing the nest, silently, methodically, making the harsh house a home for the child that was not his. It was an act of service that spoke louder than any poem Harlan Graves had ever recited to her. But the peace was fragile. 3 nights later, a nightmare jolted Clara awake. She was back in the alley, the smell of stale whiskey in her nose, a hand clamped over her mouth. She sat up, gasping, sweat drenching her nightgown. The house was silent, but something felt wrong. The dog, a mangy cur Silas kept for the cattle, was barking frantically down by the barn. The door to the lean-to opened. Silas emerged, fully dressed, his Winchester rifle in his hand. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice low and deadly. "Keep the door barred until I call for you." He slipped out into the night. Clara huddled in the bed, pulling the quilt up to her chin. She heard the wind, the barking, and then the crack of a gunshot that echoed flatly across the plains. She waited, her heart in her throat, for 20 minutes. When Silas returned, his face was grim. "What was it?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Coyotes." "Two-legged ones," Silas spat. He leaned the rifle against the wall. "Found tracks near the corral. Someone cut the wire on the south gate. The heifer got out and cut her leg up bad on the barbs. It was not an accident." "No," Silas said, pacing the room. "Someone is trying to spook the stock, trying to make us fail." "Harlan," Clara whispered. Silas stopped pacing. He looked at her, and the rage in his eyes was terrifying. "He is trying to drive us out. He wants you gone so he can pretend none of this ever happened." He spent the rest of the night sitting in the rocking chair by the window, the rifle across his lap, watching the darkness. Clara watched him, realizing that the danger was not just gossip anymore. It was real, and it was closing in. Supplies ran low, forcing a trip to town. Silas tried to go alone, but Clara insisted. She would not hide like a criminal. The atmosphere in Windsor Gap had curdled. When they walked into the general store, the conversation died instantly. The storekeeper, a man Clara had known for 3 years, hesitated before taking Silas's order. He placed the flour and sugar on the counter with a reluctance that bordered on insolence. As Clara looked at a bolt of flannel for the baby, 2 young women from the town stood near the ribbons. They whispered behind gloved hands, their eyes sliding over Clara's belly with malicious glee. "I heard he found her in the gutter," one giggled. "A whore who trapped a lonely widower." The other agreed, loud enough to be heard. "I bet the baby comes out with horns." Clara felt tears sting her eyes, but she bit the inside of her cheek until it tasted of copper. She would not cry. Not here. She moved down the aisle, trying to find Silas. Suddenly, a figure blocked her path. It was Harlan Graves. He smelled of expensive cologne and cigar smoke. He looked at her, his eyes traveling over her altered shape with a mix of disgust and possessiveness. "You look tired, Clara," he said smoothly. "This life, it does not suit you." "Leave me alone, Harlan," she said, clutching her shawl. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I can still help you. I have friends in St. Louis, a nice boarding house. You could go there, have the child, adopt it. Out! Start fresh. You do not have to live in a shack with a madman." "He is not a madman," Clara hissed. "He is twice the man you are." Harlan laughed softly. "Is he? He is a broken dog, Clara. He could not save his first family. What makes you think he can save you? He is unstable, dangerous. You're putting yourself at risk. Get away from her." The voice was a growl. Silas stood at the end of the aisle. He looked massive in his duster, his hand resting on the butt of the Colt revolver at his hip. Harlan turned, smiling his fake, oily smile. "Ah, the happy husband. I was just offering Mrs. Cord some charity. She looks like she is starving out there in the Badlands." "She is fine," Silas said, stepping between them, "and she does not want your charity." Harlan's smile vanished. "You are a stubborn fool, Cord. You did not learn your lesson the first time, did you? Nature has a way of weeding out the weak. And you just seem to attract death." The air in the store went still. Every person in the room was watching. It was a low, vicious blow, striking at the heart of Silas's trauma. Silas went white. His hand twitched near his gun. For a second, Clara thought he would kill Harlan right there among the sacks of beans and coffee. "Silas, no," she whispered, grabbing his arm. "Please, let's go." Silas trembled, fighting a battle within himself. He looked at Harlan with a hatred so pure it burned, then turned and guided Clara out of the store. "Coward!" Harlan called after them. The ride back to the ranch was silent and furious. The tension that he'd been building for weeks, the gossip, the sabotage, the fear, was ready to explode. When they got inside the house, Silas slammed the door so hard the plates rattled on the shelf. He threw his hat onto the table. "We cannot go back there," he shouted. "It is not safe." "We have to eat," Clara shouted back, her own fear turning into anger. "We cannot live in a hole in the ground because you are too proud to face him." "Proud?" Silas spun around. "You think this is pride? Did you hear him? He threatened you. He threatened the baby." "He offered me a way out," Clara cried, not meaning it, just wanting to hurt him back, to make him feel the confusion she felt. "He offered to send me to St. Louis." Silas froze. His face crumbled. "Then, maybe you should have gone," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Maybe you should have taken his money in the alley. Then you wouldn't be stuck with a failure who cannot protect his own fence line." Clara stopped. She looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the terror beneath the rage. He believed Harlan. He believed he was cursed. He believed he was going to fail her just like he failed Sarah. "No," she said softly. She crossed the room. She stood in front of him. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving, looking at the floor. "I did not mean that, Silas. I do not want to go to St. Louis. I do not want his money." "You should," Silas rasped. I'm just dragging you down with me." "You saved my life," Clara said fiercely. "You gave this baby a name." You gave me a home." "A home?" Silas looked around the rough cabin. "A shack where people shoot at us in the night, where you work until you drop." "It is our home," Clara said. She reached out and took his hand. It was rough, calloused, and shaking. She placed it on her belly. "Feel that?" she whispered. The baby kicked, a strong, solid thump against his palm. Silas stopped breathing. He looked down at his hand, then up at her face. The anger drained out of him, leaving him raw and exposed. "Clara," he breathed. The moment shifted. The fear and the shouting faded, replaced by the sharp, electric hum of desire that had been plaguing them for weeks. They were standing close, her body heavy with life, his body rigid with longing. Clara reached up and touched his shoulder. Her thumb brushed the hollow of his throat, feeling the frantic pulse there. Silas made a sound, half groan, half sigh. He raised his other hand and cupped her face. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, rough skin against smooth. He leaned in. His eyes searched hers, asking a question, begging for permission. The air between them crackled. Clara tilted her head back, her lips parting. She wanted this. She wanted to bridge the gap between them, to erase the ghosts with the warmth of a living body. Silas bent his head. His breath ghosted over her lips. He was so close she could taste him. Then he stopped. He froze, inches from her mouth. His hand on her face trembled. He pulled back just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. He squeezed his eyes shut. "I cannot," he whispered, his voice ragged with pain. "Silas." "I want to," he said, the words torn from his throat. "God help me, Clara. I want to. But I will not take more from you than you are ready to give. Not after him. Not after the alley. Not when you are scared and cornered." He pulled his hands away from her, though it seemed to cost him everything he had. "You have endured enough," he said softly. "I will not be another man who takes things from you." He stepped back, leaving her standing in the dim kitchen, her skin burning where he had touched her. He looked at her one last time, a look of profound, agonizing love mixed with iron restraint, and then turned and walked into the lean-to, closing the door between them. Clara stood there for a long time, listening to the wind, her hand pressing against her lips, realizing with a jolt that she was no longer afraid of him. She was falling in love with him, and that terrified her more than Harlan Graves ever could. The silence in the ranch house had changed texture. It was no longer the cold, hollow silence of a tomb, nor the sharp, brittle silence of two strangers forced into proximity. It was a heavy, charged silence, like the air before a lightning strike. They moved around each other in the small space with a careful, deliberate grace, wary of making contact, yet magnetically drawn to the warmth the other provided. Silas would fill her coffee cup before she could rise from the table. Clara would mend his shirts, her fingers lingering on the worn flannel where it crossed his shoulders. They were circling a fire, terrified of being burned, yet unable to walk away into the cold. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late August, when the heat finally broke the dam of their reserve. The air was still and thick, pressing down on the plains with a suffocating weight. Clara sat on the porch in the thin sliver of shade provided by the overhang, shelling peas into a tin bowl. Her belly was now a prominent, undeniable curve, tight against her cotton dress. Silas sat on the top step, cleaning a bridle. The smell of saddle soap and leather mingled with the scent of dry sage. He looked tired. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of nights spent watching the window, rifle across his knees. Clara watched his hands, large, scarred, yet capable of such surprising gentleness. She thought of the way he had almost kissed her in the kitchen, the raw want in his eyes that he had ruthlessly suppressed for her sake. "Silas," she said softly. He stopped scrubbing, though he did not look up. "Yeah? You never asked me who it was." "The father." Silas resumed his work, the rhythm of the rag against the leather slow and methodical. "I figured you would tell me when you were ready, or never. It does not change the fact that the child is yours." "It is Harlan Graves," she said. The motion of his hand stopped instantly. Silas went very still. He stared out at the shimmering horizon, his profile rigid. "I suspected," he said, his voice low and rough. "He is the only man in Windsor Gap arrogant enough to think he can take what he wants without paying for it." Clara set the bowl of peas down. Her hands were trembling. "I was working at the hotel," she began, the words tumbling out now that the seal was broken. "He would come in for dinner. He was kind to me. He brought me books from the city. He told me his wife was an invalid, that he was lonely. He made me feel special, like I was not just a poor orphan girl playing the piano for tips." She took a breath, fighting the shame that heated her cheeks. "When I told him about the baby, he changed. It was like a mask fell off. He laughed, Silas. He laughed and said he had a reputation to uphold. He said I was disposable, that I was nothing." Silas turned the bridle over in his hands. His knuckles were white, the leather groaning under his grip. A vein ticked in his jaw, a steady, angry pulse. "He made me feel small," Clara whispered, "like I was dirt on his boot." Silas was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low rumble, vibrating with a fury that had been fermenting for years. "He is a man who builds his castle on the bones of others," Silas said. He looked at Clara then, and the pain in his eyes was so naked, it took her breath away. "The night Sarah died," he said, "it was the blizzard of '86. You know that part, but you do not know why the doctor did not come." Clara shook her head, dread pooling in her stomach. "I made it to town," Silas said. "I was half frozen. I pounded on Dr. Harris's door until my fists bled. He opened the window. He told me the roads were impassable, but the roads were not impassable, Clara. I had just ridden them." He looked down at his hands. "I found out later, from the stable boy, that Harlan Graves was hosting a dinner party that night. The doctor was a guest. Harlan's wife had a migraine. Harlan told the doctor he was not to leave the house. He said a rancher's wife, out in the scrub, was not worth risking the comfort of his guests. He paid the doctor to stay warm and drink his brandy, while Sarah screamed my name in the dark." Clara covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh God, Silas!" "He killed them," Silas said, his voice devoid of emotion, which made it all the more terrifying. "As surely as if he had put a gun to their heads, he decided their lives were worth less than his convenience." He looked up at her, and the connection between them snapped into place with the force of a physical blow. They were not just two people thrown together by circumstance. They were survivors of the same monster. Harlan Graves had used his power to crush them both. Silas through indifference, Clara through predation. Clara reached out and covered his hand with hers. She squeezed tight. "He tried to destroy us," she said fiercely. "But we are still here." Silas looked at their joined hands. He turned his palm up, interlacing his fingers with hers. His grip was hard, grounding. "We are still here," he repeated, "and I will be damned if I let him finish the job." That afternoon on the porch changed everything. The shame Clara had carried evaporated, replaced by a righteous anger shared with the man beside her. They decided in low voices, as the sun went down, that they couldn't hide forever. They had to secure the land, secure the child's name, and force the town to see the truth, even if it meant dragging Harlan's secrets into the light. But the enemy struck first. It happened 3 nights later. The wind was high, howling down from the north, masking the sound of hoofbeats. Clara woke to the smell of smoke, sharp, acrid, and terrifying. "Silas!" she screamed, shaking him awake in the lean-to. Silas was up in an instant, grabbing his trousers. He threw open the door, and a wall of orange light hit them. The barn was ablaze. The fire had started in the loft and was already licking up the sides of the structure, fanned by the relentless wind. The sound was a roar, like a living beast devouring the wood. "The horses!" Silas shouted. He did not hesitate. He ran barefoot across the yard, plunging toward the inferno. Clara grabbed a shawl and stumbled out onto the porch. The heat was intense, searing her face, even from 50 yards away. The sky was lit, up in brutal reds and blacks, the smoke billowing thick and choking. She saw Silas disappear into the smoking maw of the barn doors. "Silas!" she shrieked, the name tearing from her throat. She could not just stand there. Despite the heaviness of her body, despite the fear clutching her heart, she ran to the trough. She grabbed a bucket. It was heavy, sloshing with water, but adrenaline gave her strength she did not know she possessed. She hauled it toward the house. The wind was blowing sparks onto the roof of the cabin. If the house caught, they would lose everything. She threw the water onto the porch and the dry logs of the wall. She ran back for more. Her back screamed in protest, a sharp, stabbing pain, but she ignored it. Inside the barn, she heard the terrified screaming of the horses, then the sound of hooves thundering against wood. 2 horses burst out of the smoke, manes singed, eyes rolling in terror. They galloped into the darkness. Where was Silas? The roof of the barn groaned, a sickening sound of timber giving way. "Silas!" Clara screamed again, dropping the bucket. She ran toward the barn, heedless of the heat. Just as she reached the perimeter, a figure stumbled out of the smoke. Silas. He was coughing violently, his duster smoldering, his face streaked with soot and sweat. He was dragging a calf by its hind legs, heaving it into the fresh air. He collapsed onto the dirt, gasping. Behind him, with a crash that shook the ground, the barn roof caved in, sending a geyser of sparks into the night sky. Clara fell to her knees beside him. She patted his chest, his arms, checking for injury, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "You are alive," she sobbed. "You are alive." Silas pushed himself up, wiping soot from his eyes. He looked at the ruins of the barn, then at the dark horizon where the arsonists would have fled. His coughing subsided, replaced by a cold, deadly silence. "This was not a warning," he rasped, spitting black saliva onto the ground. "This was an execution." He turned to Clara. His eyes were hard, glittering with the reflection of the flames. "They want war," he said. "They are going to get it." The loss of the barn was a heavy blow, but it crystallized Silas's resolve. He would not wait to be hunted down. 2 days later, he announced they were going to town. "We are going to the sheriff," he told Clara, as he checked the load in his revolver. "Miller is a weak man, but he is not corrupt. If I put the facts in front of him, the fence cutting, the fire, the threats, he has to act. And if he does not?" He did not finish the sentence. They took the wagon. Clara insisted on driving part of the way, claiming Silas needed to rest his eyes, though in truth, she simply needed to feel the reins in her hands, to feel in control of something. The trail to Windsor Gap wound through a narrow canyon of scrub oak and limestone boulders. It was a desolate place, filled with shadows, even at midday. Silas sat beside her, his rifle resting against his knee. He was scanning the ridge, his body tense as a wire. "Slow down here," he murmured. "It is a bad spot." Clara pulled back on the reins. The horses slowed to a walk, their ears twitching. The crack of the rifle shot was deafening in the confined space. A bullet chipped the stone inches from Clara's head, sending a spray of rock dust into her face. "Get down!" Silas roared. He did not reach for his gun first. He reached for her. He threw his body across hers, shoving her down into the footwell of the wagon, shielding her and the unborn child with his own bulk. Another shot rang out. Clara felt Silas jerk violently against her. A grunt of pain was torn from his lips, wet and guttural. "Yeah!" Silas shouted, slapping the reins with his free hand, even as he lay on top of her. The horses panicked and bolted. The wagon lurched forward, wheels bouncing wildly over the rocks. Silas pushed himself up, grabbing his rifle. He swayed, his left shoulder a ruin of torn fabric and blood, but he swung the weapon toward the ridge. He fired once, twice, 3 times, a lever-action rhythm of defiance. Clara lay curled on the floorboards, her hands over her head, the sound of gunfire ringing in her ears. She felt the wagon careening dangerously. Silas fired again. "I see you, you cowards!" he bellowed. The ambushers, realizing their target was not only alive, but returning fire with lethal accuracy, ceased shooting. The wagon thundered out of the canyon and onto the open plain. Silas slumped back against the seat. The rifle slipped from his fingers. "Silas!" Clara scrambled up to her knees. His face was gray, draining of color rapidly. Blood was pulsing from a wound high on his left shoulder, soaking his coat and shirt. Take the reins," he gasped, his eyes losing focus. "Get us home. Do not stop." Clara grabbed the leather straps. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it would crack her ribs. She looked at the trail ahead, then back at Silas, who was sliding dangerously to the side. "Hold on!" she screamed. The ride back was a nightmare. The sky seemed to expand, vast and indifferent, pressing down on the tiny wagon crawling across the earth. Clara drove with a ferocity born of sheer terror. Her arms ached, her back spasmed with every jolt, and the baby kicked in protest, but she did not slow down. She glanced at Silas constantly. He was drifting in and out of consciousness, muttering names she did not know, calling out for Sarah, then for Clara. "Stay with me, Silas Cord," she yelled over the wind. "Don't you dare leave me." When they finally rolled into the ranch yard, the sun was dipping low. Clara halted the team and scrambled down, clumsy with weight and exhaustion. She helped Silas down. He was heavy, dead weight, leaning against her. She grit her teeth, wrapping her arm around his waist, half carrying, half dragging him into the house. She got him onto the bed she had been sleeping in alone for months. Clara became a flurry of motion. She stoked the fire. She boiled water. She found the bottle of whiskey Silas kept for toothaches. She tore a clean sheet into strips. She cut his shirt away. The wound was ugly, a hole punched through the muscle. But as she washed away the grime and blood, she saw with a sob of relief that the bullet had passed through. It had missed the bone and the lung. She poured whiskey over the wound. Silas groaned in his delirium, his body arching off the mattress. "I am sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I am so sorry." She threaded a needle. She had sewn dresses, mended trousers, embroidered pillowcases, but stitching human flesh was different. The skin was tough, the resistance sickening. Yet her hands, usually so gentle, were steady. She stitched him up, binding the wound tight. She washed his chest, wiping away the sweat and the powder burns. She felt the hard ridge of his ribs, the heavy beat of his heart under her palm. It was an intimate, terrifying act of service. She was learning the map of his body in the worst possible way. By midnight, the fever had broken, or at least receded. Silas slept deeply, his breathing harsh but regular. Clara sat in the wooden chair by the bed, watching him. The lamplight cast long shadows across the room. She was exhausted, her body throbbing in sympathy with his, but she could not sleep. She kept her hand on his forearm, needing the tactile proof that he was still there. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, he stirred. "Clara." His voice was a dry rasp. Clara leaned forward instantly. "I am here, Silas." He blinked, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. He looked at the ceiling, then at his bandaged shoulder, and finally at her. He saw the blood on her dress, his blood. He saw the fatigue etched into her pale face. "You got us home," he whispered. "Yes." He tried to sit up, but winced and fell back. "You drove the wagon in your condition." "I had to," Clara said. "You were busy bleeding to death." Silas looked at her for a long moment. His defenses were gone, stripped away by pain and the near miss with death. "I thought I lost you," he said. "When the bullet hit, my only thought was that I failed again." "You did not fail," Clara said firmly. "You saved me. You covered me. You took that bullet for me." Silas moved his hand, sliding it down until his fingers brushed hers. "I would take 100 more," he said quietly. Clara felt a sob rise in her throat. She gripped his hand. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why do you care so much? It is not just honor, Silas. It is not just duty. Why?" Silas looked at her, his dark eyes unguarded. "Because you are the only thing in this world that makes sense to me anymore," he confessed. "Because when I walk into this house and see you, the ghosts go quiet. Because I love you, Clara." The words hung in the air, fragile and absolute. Clara let out a shaky breath. She leaned her forehead against their joined hands. "I was so scared," she whispered. "Not of the shooting. I was scared of the silence. I was scared of being left behind without you. I love you, Silas. I think I have loved you since you stood up in that alley." Silas brought her hand to his lips. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles, slow, reverent, and deeply claiming. It was a gesture of worship. "Come here," he murmured. Clara hesitated. "You are hurt." "I need you close," he said. "Please." Clara stood up. She blew out the lamp, plunging the room into soft moonlight. She carefully climbed onto the bed, mindful of his injury. She lay down on top of the quilt, curling onto her side, facing him. Silas shifted, gritting his teeth against the pain, and draped his good arm over her. He pulled her gently against his uninjured side. Clara rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady thump-thump of his heart. She felt safe for the first time in months. The fear of the town, of Harlan, of the future, receded. Silas's hand moved down her back and came to rest on the swell of her belly. The baby, perhaps sensing the calm, shifted, a slow roll beneath the skin. Silas's breath hitched. "He feels strong," he whispered into her hair. "She," Clara corrected softly. "I think it is a she." "She feels strong," Silas amended. He kissed the top of her head. "We will figure this out," he promised in the dark. "We will rebuild the barn. We will deal with Graves. But right now, just sleep." Clara closed her eyes. She felt the warmth of his body seeping into hers, binding them together. They were bruised, battered, and hunted. But as she drifted off to sleep in the circle of his arm, Clara knew they were no longer broken. They were a family, and that made them dangerous. The wound in Silas Cord's shoulder knit together with a slowness that maddened him. For 2 weeks, he prowled the confines of the small ranch house like a caged cougar, his left arm bound in a sling, his right hand never straying far from the grip of his revolver. The physical pain was manageable, a dull throb he could ignore, but the psychological torment was a fire that refused to go out. Every time he looked at Clara, heavily pregnant and moving with the slow, careful gait of a woman near her time, he saw a target. He saw the fragility of their existence. The ambush in the canyon had stripped away the last illusion that they could simply endure until the storm passed. The storm was not passing. It was hunting them. The attacks did not stop. They merely changed shape, becoming quieter and more insidious. It started with the water. One morning, Silas went to the well to draw the day's supply. He found a dead crow floating in the bucket, its feathers slick with something oily. He sniffed the water. It smelled of rot and something chemical, lye perhaps, or sheep dip. He poured it out onto the dry earth and watched the grass hiss. If Clara had drunk that, she and the baby would be dead before noon. 2 days later, Clara was hanging sheets on the line, the wind whipping the wet fabric around her legs. A crack echoed from the distant ridge, a sound like a dry branch snapping. A splinter of wood exploded from the porch post, inches from her head. There was no second shot, just the terrifying knowledge that someone was watching through a scope, toying with them, measuring the distance between life and death. At night, the dogs would not settle. They paced the perimeter of the yard, hackles raised, growling at the darkness. In the morning, Silas would find hoof prints circling the ranch, just out of rifle range. They were tightening the noose. The landscape itself seemed to conspire against them. The sky turned a flat, iron gray, heavy with the threat of early winter. The wind carried the scent of snow and ozone. Coyotes grew bolder, coming right up to the porch steps, their yellow eyes reflecting the lamplight, yipping with a hunger that sounded like laughter. Silas sat at the table, cleaning his Winchester for the 3rd time that day. The smell of gun oil filled the small room. "We cannot keep living like this," he said. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of a verdict. Clara stood by the stove, stirring a pot of beans. Her hand rested on the small of her back, rubbing a spot that had been aching since dawn. "Silas, please," she said, not turning around. "If you go after him, he will kill you. He has men. He has the law in his pocket." "I am not going to wait for him to burn the house down with us inside," Silas replied, snapping the lever of the rifle shut. "He wants a war. I will give him one. I will ride into town and put a bullet in him before he can send another hired gun to shoot at my wife." Clara turned then, her face pale and drawn. "And then what?" asked, her voice rising. Then you are a murderer. Then the sheriff hangs you and I am left alone with this baby in a town that hates me. Is that the plan? Silas stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. The plan is survival, Clara. Do you think he is going to stop? He tried to kill us in the canyon. He poisoned the well. He is counting on me being too scared or too weak to strike back. Clara crossed the room, ignoring the heaviness in her legs. She grabbed his good arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. Think of the child, Silas. You cannot raise a family with blood on your hands. You cannot build a life on vengeance. Silas looked down at her. His eyes were hard, burning with a cold blue flame. But beneath the anger, she saw the desperate fear of a man who had already lost everything once. I cannot raise a family under a tombstone either, he said roughly. Sometimes justice on this frontier is taken, Clara. It is not given, not to people like us. He pulled away from her and walked to the window, staring out at the bleak, wind-scoured plain. We have one chance, he said after a long silence. We go to town together. We do not go to kill him in the dark. We drag him into the light. We call a meeting. We get Miller, the preacher, anyone with a conscience. We put the truth in front of them. If he draws on me then, in front of witnesses, well, that is his choice. It was a dangerous gamble. It relied on the assumption that the town possessed a shred of morality and that Harlan Graves had a breaking point. We go tomorrow, Silas said. The morning dawned cold and hostile. The sky was a low, oppressive ceiling of slate clouds that seemed to scrape the tops of the hills. The wind had teeth, biting through wool and leather. Silas hitched the wagon. He helped Clara up, his movements gentle but efficient. He placed a heavy buffalo robe over her lap and checked the load in his revolver. Are you ready? He asked. Clara nodded, gripping the edge of the seat. A cramp, sharp and tightening, seized her belly. It was different from the Braxton Hicks contractions she had felt for weeks. This one had a rhythm. It wrapped around her lower back and squeezed. She held her breath until it passed, forcing a smile onto her face. I am ready, she lied. She could not tell him. If he knew she was in early labor, he would turn the wagon around. He would barricade them in the ranch house, and they would be sitting ducks for Harlan's men. They had to end this today. The ride to Windsor Gap was grueling. The wagon jolted over frozen ruts, every bump sending a fresh wave of pain through Clara's body. She timed the contractions by the landmarks they passed: the twisted oak, the dried creek bed, the leaning fence post. They were coming every 20 minutes. She bit her lip until it bled, staring at the gray ears of the horses. Silas was focused on the road, scanning the ridges for ambush, his jaw set in a grim line. He did not see her wince. He did not see her knuckles turn white as she gripped the robe. They reached town just after noon. Windsor Gap felt sullen and quiet, hunkered down against the coming storm. Silas drove the wagon to the livery stable, but he did not unhitch the team. He wanted a quick exit if things went wrong. They walked to the mercantile first. Mrs. Miller was there, buying flour. When she saw them, she looked nervous, her eyes darting to the door. Mrs. Miller, Silas said, removing his hat. We need your help. He spoke quickly, outlining the plan. He wanted the town to gather at the Golden Steer Saloon, the largest indoor space in town, at 2 o'clock. He wanted witnesses. Mrs. Miller hesitated, looking at Clara's swollen belly and Silas's bandaged shoulder. "He will destroy you, Silas," she whispered. "He is already trying," Clara said, her voice steady despite the pain radiating up her spine. "We are asking you to stand witness. That is all. Just watch and listen." Mrs. Miller looked at Clara, really looked at her, and saw the steel beneath the fear. She nodded slowly. "I will get the Reverend," she said, "and the Smith. They are good men. They just need a reason to be brave." Silas nodded. "Thank you." They split up to spread the word quietly. Silas went to find the sheriff, hoping to force the lawman to do his job. Clara needed to sit down. The pain was getting worse, a grinding pressure that made it hard to breathe. "I will wait in the back room of the Mercantile," she told Silas. "Mrs. Miller said I could rest there." "Stay put," Silas ordered. "Do not open the door for anyone but me." He watched her walk into the back, his eyes lingering on her form, with a mixture of worry and determination, before he turned and strode toward the jailhouse. Clara entered the storage room. It was dim, smelling of dry goods and sawdust. She found a crate and sat down, leaning her head back against the wall. Another contraction hit, harder this time, stealing the air from her lungs. She rubbed her belly, whispering to the child, "Not yet, little one. Please, not yet. Just give us an hour." The door to the main store opened. Clara expected Mrs. Miller. Instead, 3 men walked in. They were not townspeople. They wore dusters that had seen too many miles and carried guns low on their hips. Their faces were rough, unshaven, and cruel. Harlan's hired hands. "Well, now," one of them drawled, closing the door and sliding the bolt home. "Look what we found hiding among the potato sacks." Clara stood up, backing away until she hit a stack of crates, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Get out," she said, her voice trembling. "My husband is the sheriff." The men laughed. "Your husband is a dead man walking, Mrs. Cord. Mr. Graves sent us to have a little chat. He thinks it is time you moved on." The leader, a man with a scar splitting his lip, stepped closer. He looked at her belly with a sneer. "Problem is, you are carrying a lot of baggage. Mr. Graves thinks it would be better if that baggage disappeared. There are ways to solve problems before a baby comes." He reached for her. Clara did not scream. She reacted with the instinct of a mother protecting her young. She grabbed a heavy brass scale from the crate beside her and swung it with all her might. It connected with the man's ear with a sickening crunch. He roared in pain, stumbling back. "You little witch!" he screamed. The other 2 lunged at her. Clara fought. She clawed at eyes. She kicked. She bit. But they were strong and she was heavy with child. One of them grabbed her hair, yanking her head back, while the other pinned her arms. They shoved her hard against the wall. "Hold her still," the leader growled, wiping blood from his ear. "I am going to make sure that brat never takes a breath." He drew back his fist, aiming for her stomach. The door to the storage room exploded inward. It did not open. It shattered. The wood splintered as a boot kicked it off its hinges. Silas Cord stood in the opening. For a second, he took in the scene. Clara pinned against the wall, the man with his fist raised. Silas did not speak. He did not warn them. He simply unleashed a roar that sounded like something torn from the throat of a grizzly bear. He crossed the room in a blur of violence. He did not draw his gun. He wanted to feel them break. He grabbed the leader by the throat and slammed him into a shelf of canned goods. The shelf collapsed, burying them in tin and wood. Silas pounded his fist into the man's face once, twice, 3 times, until the man went limp. other two released Clara and drew their knives. Silas turned on them, his eyes wild, completely unhinged. He ignored the pain in his shoulder. He caught the wrist of the nearest man, twisting it until the bone snapped with a loud pop. The man screamed and dropped the knife. Silas headbutted him, sending him crumbling to the floor. The third man scrambled back, terrified by this demon in a duster coat. He tried to run, but Silas caught him by the collar and hurled him through the open door into the main store, where he landed in a heap of flour sacks. Silas stood over the leader, who was groaning on the floor. Silas drew his revolver. He cocked the hammer. The barrel shook with the force of his rage. He aimed right between the man's eyes. "No!" Clara threw herself between Silas and the man. She grabbed Silas's coat, pushing against his chest with both hands. "Silas, stop! Look at me!" Silas blinked, his breathing ragged. He looked at her, but his eyes were still seeing red. "They touched you!" he snarled. "They tried to kill the baby." "If you kill him, you become what they say you are," Clara screamed, tears streaming down her face. "They will say you are a madman. They will hang you. And then who protects us? Who protects me?" Silas's hand trembled. He looked at the man bleeding on the floor, then at Clara's terrified face. He saw the desperation in her eyes. "Do not let him win, Silas. Do not let Harlan Graves turn you into a murderer." Silas let out a shuddering breath. He slowly lowered the hammer of the gun. He stepped back, his chest heaving. He looked down at the hired men. "Crawl out," he ordered, his voice dead cold. "Crawl out of here before I change my mind." The men, bloodied and humiliated, scrambled over each other to get to the door. They stumbled out into the street, leaving a trail of blood on the floorboards. Silas turned to Clara. He reached out, his hands hovering, checking her for injuries. "Did they hurt you?" he rasped. "I am fine," she gasped, though another contraction was seizing her, harder than before. "Just get me to the saloon. We have to finish this." Silas saw the pain in her eyes, but he assumed it was fear. He nodded, holstering his gun. "Let's go." The Golden Steer Saloon was packed. The word had spread. The sheriff was there, leaning against the bar, looking unhappy. Reverend Miller stood by the piano. The tables were filled with ranchers, shopkeepers, and wives who had come to see the spectacle. When Silas and Clara walked in, the room went silent. They looked like they had walked through hell. Silas was covered in dust and blood, not his own, and Clara's hair was wild, her face pale and fierce. They walked to the center of the room. Silas put his hand on Clara's back, steadying her. "We called you here because the law in this town is deaf," Silas announced, his voice carrying to the rafters. "Because a man thinks he can burn my barn, poison my well, and assault my wife without answering for it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara stepped forward. She winced as a spasm of pain shot through her abdomen, but she stood tall. "The child I carry," she said, her voice clear and ringing, "is not Silas Cords." A gasp went through the room. "Silas married me to save me from ruin," she continued. "But the father is a man who sits in the front pew on Sundays. A man who offered me money to kill this child. A man who sent thugs to beat me in an alley, and just now sent them to the mercantile to finish the job." She took a breath, scanning the faces until she found him. Harlan Graves stood near the back, flanked by two of his associates. He was drinking a whiskey, looking bored. "His name is Harlan Graves," Clara said, pointing a trembling finger at him. The silence that followed was absolute. Heads turned toward the cattle baron. Harlan chuckled. He set his glass down slowly. "This is pathetic," he said, shaking his head. "I knew you were desperate, Cord, but putting your whore of a wife up to this, it is beneath even you." "She is not a liar," Silas shouted. "You hired men to attack her. They just confessed in the mercantile." Harlan's smile didn't waver. "I have no idea what you were talking about, but I do know that you are a violent, unstable man. Everyone knows about your episodes. You lost your mind when your first wife died, and now you are inventing conspiracies to explain why you can't hold onto a ranch." He stepped forward, his hand brushing back his coat to reveal the pearl-handled revolver on his hip. "You are dangerous, Cord, and I think it is time the town put a stop to it." "You are the one who is dangerous, Harlan," Mrs. Miller shouted from the crowd. "I saw your men running from the store. They were bleeding." Harlan's eyes snapped to the farm wife. "Be quiet, woman." He drew his gun. It happened fast. The room erupted in screams. Silas drew his weapon in the same heartbeat. They stood 20 feet apart, barrels leveled at each other's chests. The years of grief, the burning barn, the dead baby in the snow, the poisoned water, it all distilled down to this single, shaking moment. "Put it down, Harlan," Sheriff Miller shouted, finally stepping away from the bar, his own gun drawn but wavering. "You stick to writing parking tickets, Miller," Harlan spat, his eyes locked on Silas. "This ends now." Silas's finger tightened on the trigger. He could end it. He could put a bullet in Harlan's heart and end the threat forever. But he saw Clara out of the corner of his eye. She was looking at him, pleading silently. Suddenly, Clara doubled over. A scream tore from her throat, a sound of primal, agonizing pain that shattered the tension like glass. "The baby!" someone shouted. "She is birthing!" Water pooled on the floorboards beneath her skirts, mixed with a streak of blood. The distraction was total. Harlan blinked, his gaze flicking to Clara for a split second. In that second, the sheriff made his move. He lunged at Harlan, grabbing for the gun. "No!" Harlan shouted. They grappled. The gun went off. The boom was deafening in the enclosed space. Silas did not fire. He had dropped his aim the moment Clara screamed, rushing to catch her as she fell. Harlan Graves stumbled back, a look of utter surprise on his face. He looked down. A red blossom was spreading across his white shirt just below the ribs. The sheriff stood back, holding the smoking gun he had wrestled away, looking horrified. Harlan fell to his knees. He looked at the crowd, then at Clara, and finally at Silas. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a bubble of blood escaped. He collapsed face forward onto the sawdust floor. He was dead. The room was chaos. Women were screaming. Men were shouting. The sheriff was yelling for order, but Silas heard none of it. He was on his knees, holding Clara. She was gripping his shirt, gasping for air, her face gray. "Silas," she whispered, "it is coming now." Outside, the storm finally broke. Thunder shook the building and rain began to lash against the windows in sheets. "We have to move her," Mrs. Miller yelled, rushing over. "Get her upstairs." Silas scooped Clara up in his arms. She screamed again as a contraction ripped through her. He ignored the pain in his own shoulder, ignored the dead man on the floor, and carried her toward the stairs. The room above the saloon was small and dusty, used for storage. Mrs. Miller swept a pile of blankets onto a cot. "Lay her down," she ordered. Silas placed her on the cot. Clara was writhing, her hands clutching her belly. The rain hammered on the roof, a deafening drumbeat. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room in stark white bursts. "Stay with me," Clara begged, gripping Silas's hand until her nails dug into his skin. "Do not leave me." "I am here," Silas said, his voice thick with tears. "I am right here. I am not going anywhere." He knelt beside the cot, wiping the sweat from her forehead. The ghost of Sarah was in the room. He could feel it. The memory of the blizzard, the blood, the silence. It tried to choke him. But this was not Sarah. This was Clara. And the man lying dead downstairs could no longer hurt them. "Breathe," Silas whispered, pressing his forehead to her hand. "Just breathe. We are going to get through this." Clara screamed as the labor took her, her voice joining the thunder outside. Silas held on, anchoring her to the earth, determined that this time, death would not win. This time, life would fight back. The storm that raged outside the Golden Steer Saloon was a physical manifestation of the battle being fought in the small, dusty room upstairs. The rain lashed against the single pane of glass like handfuls of gravel, and the thunder rolled across the plains in continuous, bone-rattling sheets. But inside the room, the atmosphere was tight with a different kind of electricity. The sharp, metallic scent of blood, and the heavy, suffocating weight of fear. Clara lay on the narrow cot, her body arched in agony. The labor had been going on for 6 hours, or perhaps 6 years. Time had lost its shape. There was only the pain, a relentless tide that receded only to crash back down harder, threatening to pull her under. Her hair was plastered to her skull with sweat, her face gray in the flickering light of the kerosene lamp Mrs. Miller had hung from a nail. "Push, child," Mrs. Miller commanded, her voice grim. "You have to push." "I cannot," Clara gasped, her head thrashing on the rough pillow. "I have nothing left." "You have everything left," Mrs. Miller snapped, though her hands were gentle as she wiped Clara's forehead with a cool rag. "You are not going to give up now, not after everything." Silas knelt beside the bed on the hard wooden floor. He had not moved for hours. His left shoulder, still bandaged and throbbing from the bullet wound, was stiff, but he did not feel it. He held Clara's hand with a grip that threatened to crush her fingers, anchoring her to the world of the living. His face was a mask of terror. Every time Clara screamed, a sound that tore at her throat and his heart, he saw Sarah. He saw the blood on the snow. He saw the silent, blue face of his first child. The ghosts were in the corners of the room, watching, waiting to see if history would repeat itself. "Silas," Clara whimpered, her eyes rolling back as another contraction seized her. "It hurts. It hurts so much." "I know," Silas whispered, pressing his lips to her damp knuckles. "I know, but you are strong. You are the strongest woman I have ever known. Stay with me." Mrs. Miller moved to the foot of the bed, her expression tightening. She muttered something under her breath, a curse or a prayer. "What is it?" Silas asked, his voice cracking. "The baby is turned wrong," Mrs. Miller said, keeping her voice low but unable to hide the urgency. "The shoulder is catching, and the heartbeat is slow. It is too slow." The air left the room. Silas felt his own heart stop. "We are losing them," Mrs. Miller said, looking at Silas with stark honesty. "If she does not get this baby out in the next few minutes, Silas, we might lose them both." "No." The word fell from Silas's lips like a stone. "No," he shouted, the volume startling Clara back to lucidity. He leaned over her, his face inches from hers. His eyes were wild, burning with a fierce, desperate light. "Clara, listen to me. You have to do this. You have to push. I will not let you die. Do you hear me? I will not let you go. I can't, Clara sobbed. You can, Silas roared, tears spilling down his soot-streaked cheeks. You fought Harlan Graves. You fought the town. You fought the fire. Do not let the darkness win now. Push, Clara, push for us. He buried his face in the mattress beside her shoulder. Please, God, he prayed, his voice breaking into a jagged sob. If you are out there, if you listen to men like me, take everything else. Take the ranch, take my arm, take my life, but do not take her. Do not take the child. Please. Something in his voice, the raw, naked agony of a man who had already lost too much, pierced through Clara's exhaustion. She looked at him, at his bowed head, at the scars on his neck. She realized that if she died, it would destroy him. He would not survive losing her. A surge of adrenaline, born of love and terrifying necessity, flooded her veins. She gritted her teeth, grabbed Silas's shirt with both hands, and screamed, a primal, defiant sound that rose above the thunder. She pushed with every ounce of rage she felt toward Harlan Graves, with every ounce of love she felt for the man kneeling beside her, with every hope she held for the life inside her. Here it comes, Mrs. Miller shouted. One more! Give me one more! Clara gave a final, shattering cry, her body convulsing in one last massive effort, and then silence for a heartbeat. The only sound was the rain and Clara's ragged, gasping breath. Silas lifted his head, terrified to look. He saw Mrs. Miller holding a small, slick bundle. The baby was purple, still, silent. Silas felt the world tilt on its axis. Come on, Mrs. Miller hissed. She rubbed the baby's back vigorously with a rough towel. Come on, little one. Breathe. A second passed, then two. Then a sound, a gurgle, a cough, and then a thin, high-pitched wail that pierced the gloom of the room like a trumpet blast. It was the most beautiful sound Silas had ever heard. It was the sound of victory. Mrs. Miller let out a laugh that sounded like a sob. It is a girl, she announced. A fighter, just like her mother. She quickly cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a flannel blanket, then placed the bundle on Clara's chest. Clara looked down. Her vision was blurred with sweat and tears, but she saw the tiny red face, the fists clenching at the air, the dark hair plastered to the small skull. Silas stared. He could not move. He was frozen by a relief so profound it felt like a physical, crushing weight. His shoulders began to shake. He covered his face with his blood-stained hands and wept, great heaving sobs that shook his large frame. Clara reached out and touched his hair. Silas, she whispered. Look. He lowered his hands. He looked at the child. He looked at the life he had helped bring into the world, the life he had fought for in alleys and canyons. She is beautiful, he choked out. Clara smiled weakly. She is ours, Silas. No matter who, no matter where she came from, she is ours. Silas reached out with a trembling finger and stroked the baby's cheek. The skin was impossibly soft. She is a cord, he said fiercely. She is a cord, and she will never know a day of fear in her life. I swear it. The storm broke just before dawn. The sun rose over a town that was forever changed. Harlan Graves was dead. His body moved to the undertaker's parlor. The sheriff was taking statements. The gossip was already mutating, shifting from scandal to tragedy to a strange sort of legend. Silas carried Clara down the stairs of the saloon later that morning. The baby was tucked securely in Mrs. Miller's arms. The main room of the saloon was empty. save for the swamper mopping up the blood, Harlan's blood, from the floor. They walked out into the street. The air was washed clean, smelling of ozone and wet earth. A small crowd had gathered, not to jeer, but to watch. They saw the rancher, battered and bandaged, carrying his wife with a tenderness that shamed them. They saw the new life bundled against the cold. A woman stepped forward, the baker's wife. She held out a loaf of fresh bread, wrapped in a cloth. "For your strength, ma'am," she murmured, not meeting Clara's eyes. "Thank you," Clara said softly. Another man, the blacksmith, stepped up. "I have an old cradle in the loft," he said to Silas. "Real sturdy. I will bring it by the ranch." Silas nodded. "I would be obliged." It was not an apology. The town of Windsor Gap was too proud and too hard for apologies. But it was an acknowledgement. The judgment had broken under the weight of the truth. In the weeks that followed, the legal entanglements of Harlan Graves' estate played out. The sheriff, perhaps seeking redemption for his years of turning a blind eye, ensured that justice was served. A significant portion of Harlan's liquid assets was seized to pay debts, including a substantial sum for damages and medical expenses to Clara Cord. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to buy seed, fix the barn, and ensure they would not starve come winter. Back at the ranch, the healing began. The land was scarred. The charred remains of the barn stood as a black skeleton against the sky, but the grass was already greening at the base of the burnt timbers. Silas worked with a new energy. Neighbors who had once shunned him now rode out to help. They raised the new barn in 3 days, a community effort that served as a silent peace offering. They fixed the fences Harlan's men had cut. They cleared the poisoned well. Clara healed slowly. The birth had taken a toll on her body. She spent the first week in bed, watching the dust motes dance in the light from the window. But she was not alone. Silas was everywhere. He was the one who woke in the night when the baby cried, bringing her to Clara to nurse. He was the one who washed the nappies, boiling the water in the yard. He was the one who cooked the meals, bringing her stew and coffee with a gentleness that belied his rough hands. The baby, whom they named Rose, for the wild roses that grew in the shelter of the rocks, was the center of their world. One evening, Clara sat in the rocking chair, nursing Rose. Silas sat at the table, mending a bridle. The fire crackled in the hearth. Clara watched him. She saw the way the lines of tension around his eyes had smoothed out. She saw the way he looked at Rose with a reverence that bordered on awe. "Do you think about him?" Clara asked quietly. Silas looked up. "Harlan." "No, the baby you lost." Silas put the bridle down. He looked into the fire. "Every day," he admitted. "But it is different now. Before, the memory was a weight. It dragged me down. Now it is just a scar. It reminds me of what I survived. And it reminds me of what I have to protect." He stood up and walked over to her. He knelt beside the chair, looking down at Rose's sleeping face. "You gave me back my life, Clara," he whispered. "I was dead for 5 years. You and this little one, you woke me up." Clara reached out and touched his cheek. "You saved us first, Silas." Their intimacy bloomed in these quiet moments. It was not the frantic, desperate connection of two people clinging to a raft in a storm. It was the deep, root-bound love of two trees growing together against the wind. It was in the way he brushed her hair for her when she was too tired to lift her arms. It was in the way she defended him when a trader tried to shortchange him on a sale. It was in the laughter they shared when Rose made a funny face or grabbed Silas's finger with a grip like iron. 6 weeks after the birth, the autumn air turned crisp. Clara's strength had returned. The soreness was gone, replaced by the resilience of a woman who had walked through fire. One night, after Rose was asleep in the oak cradle, the house was quiet. Silas stood by the window, looking out at the star-lit plains. The moon silvered the grass, turning the rugged landscape into something dreamlike. Clara walked up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against his back. She felt him tense for a second, then relax, leaning into her embrace. "She is asleep?" he asked softly. "Sound asleep." Clara moved around him, stepping into the space between him and the window. She looked up at him. The moonlight washed over his face, highlighting the strong jaw, the dark eyes, the mouth that she had watched for months. "Silas," she said. He looked down at her. His gaze was heavy, filled with the same hunger she had seen in the kitchen months ago, but stripped of the fear. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough. "I have never been more sure of anything," Clara answered. He reached up and brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. His fingers trailed down her cheek, tracing the line of her throat. His touch was electric, sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. Clara leaned into his hand, closing her eyes. Silas bent his head. The kiss was slow. It was a question and an answer all at once. His lips were warm, firm, and incredibly gentle. He tasted of coffee and longing. Clara made a soft sound in her throat and wound her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, becoming urgent, a release of all the months of restraint, fear, and silent devotion. He lifted her up, carrying her to the bed they had shared as strangers, then as allies, and now as lovers. Their lovemaking was not a taking. It was a giving. It was a conversation spoken in skin and breath. Silas worshipped her body, treating the scars of her pregnancy not as imperfections, but as marks of honor. Clara held him, anchoring him, pouring all her gratitude and passion into the man who had chosen her when the world had cast her aside. It was a celebration of survival. It was the final seal on their bond. When they fell asleep, tangled together under the quilt, the wind outside sounded less like a threat and more like a lullaby. The next morning, the sun was brilliant. The sky was a vast, piercing blue, stretching over the Wyoming territory like a benediction. Silas saddled 2 horses. He bundled Rose into a sling across his chest, securing her tightly against his heart. "Come on," he said to Clara. "I want to show you something." They rode up the low hill that overlooked the ranch. The air was cold and sweet. The grass rippled around the horses' legs like a golden sea. At the top, they stopped. Silas dismounted and helped Clara down. He handed Rose to her, then stood with his arm around Clara's waist, looking out over the valley. Below them, the ranch lay peaceful. Smoke curled from the chimney. The new barn stood tall and bright. The cattle grazed in the distance. "See that valley to the south, where the creek bends?" Silas pointed. "Yes. Next spring, I am going to plant wheat there. And I am going to build a bigger house, stone this time, with a room for Rose. And maybe rooms for more." He turned to her, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I went to the lawyer when we were in town last week," he said. "I had the deed changed. The ranch, half of it is in your name, Clara, and the other half is in trust for Rose." "Silas," Clara gasped. "You did not have to do that." "I did," he said seriously. "I will never let you be at the mercy of a man's whim again, not even mine. This is yours. You earned it. You fought for it." Clara looked at the paper, tears blurring her vision. She looked at the man standing beside her, solid, scarred, and utterly hers. She thought back to that day in the alley. She remembered the dust, the smell of whiskey, the terror. She remembered stumbling into him, gasping, "Easy! I am pregnant!" She remembered the resentment she had felt in the wagon, the feeling that her life had been stolen, that her choice had been erased. She looked at Rose, sleeping contentedly in her arms. She looked at the ring on her finger. "I used to regret it," she said softly, looking at the horizon. "I used to hate that you made the choice for me. And now?" "And now?" Silas asked, watching her face. Clara smiled, and it was a smile full of light. "Now," she said, "I thank God every day that you acted fast, because you saw the future when I was too scared to look. You chose us, Silas, and now I choose you. I choose this life. I choose us." Silas pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "We made it," he whispered. They stood there for a long time, a man, a woman, and a child, alone on the high plains. The wind blew around them, indifferent and eternal. But they were no longer at its mercy. They had carved a home out of the wilderness, and a love out of tragedy. Silas took the reins of the horses. He put his other hand on the small of Clara's back. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Clara looked at the ranch one last time, then nodded. "Yes," she said. "Let's go home." They walked down the hill together, the baby tucked safely between them, stepping into a future that would be hard and uncertain and wild, but undeniably, wonderfully theirs. Thank you for listening to this story. It has been a journey through the dust and the storms of the old frontier, and I am grateful you rode along with us until the very end. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. It is always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this tale of survival and love on the high plains, please consider subscribing to From Wild West. We have many more stories to tell, hidden in the history of the American frontier. And finally, share your thoughts in English in the comments. Did Silas do the right thing in the alley? Do you think they will survive the next winter? I look forward to reading your words. Until next time, keep your powder dry.